Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. You're watching my channel's weekly compendium for the week ending Monday, September 2nd, 2024. Enjoy. Case file number 1805, written by Do Strike 1670. A chill in the air, a shadow sweep, the night something moved without a peep. This happened a couple days ago, and I still haven't figured out what could possibly explain what I saw. So here I am. The other night I was laying on my bed in the bedroom, while my son was in the other room playing with his cars. I had been laying there for a couple of minutes. Let me explain the layout of the room so this makes sense. I have a Sensi plug-in light on the wall that I face. It is underneath the window in the room, and our dresser is to its left, my right, with the TV on it. The window has drapes that hang down below the window, but above the Sensi light. When it's turned on, the light is on, which it was at the time this happened. I was laying on the bed with my phone in my right hand, and my head was on a pillow, so I was comfortable looking at my phone. I was holding the phone, and behind it was a reflection of the light and drapes on the wall. I had no fans on, and the air conditioner was on but not running. The window was locked shut, so no draft was coming in. I was scrolling on my phone, and on the wall, it looked like something moved between the light and the wall. The drapes even had a little movement to them. From my perspective, it looked exactly like when a person walks between a light, and you see the shadow on the wall and see their figure move through it quickly. As soon as it happened, I jumped up and said, "What was that?" I got a little cold, and my son came into the room and asked, "What, Daddy?" He could see the look on my face, and I told him something weird just happened. We own no pets that could have done it without being noticed. I have a lot of background in the spiritual world, but not when it comes to this. So what could it have been? Because I definitely saw something move in front of the light, and the drapes started moving slightly. But nothing was there. Case file number 1806, written by Hey Booby. Objects that move and cigarettes that clone. Tales from a house that's never alone. We had a history of odd things happening in our old house that we can't really explain. One year, we had a friend over helping us wrap up our kitchen renovation. My husband and our friend Jay came inside, and Jay told him, "I thought you don't smoke Marlboros," pointed to a pack of Marlboros sitting in one of the open cabinets. My husband said, "I don't, that's your pack," and picked it up to give it to him. Jay reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack, saying they had been in his pocket the entire time. The packs were completely identical, down to having 3 cigarettes left in the exact same spot. Jay is the only person we know who smokes that kind of cigarette, and nobody else had been in our house all day anyway. And the kicker is, I had just painted the trim above that cabinet while they were outside, using the cabinet to set my rag down, and it had been completely empty then. As best we can figure, somehow the pack duplicated. It seems impossible, but we have no idea where else it could have come from. Jay is not great at keeping a straight face, and he was as shocked as we were, so I believe him that he didn't plant them there to mess with us. And we've had other weird object-related things happen that we can't explain. Like this one. One Saturday, not long after my husband and I moved into that house, I spent the entire day doing laundry. I was way behind because we had just moved, and things had been hectic, so I had about 10 loads to do. I started by sorting my first 4 loads: darks, lights, heavy duty, and delicates. I had 4 identical laundry baskets specifically so I could sort them like this. Throughout the day, I got into a good routine. I was using my baskets to cycle clean and dirty laundry from the bedroom to the washer and dryer, then back again. These 2 rooms are the only places I had the baskets. At the end of the day, I realized I only had 3 baskets. We never found that 4th one. Some other weird things had happened there. Once in the kitchen, I closed the fridge door as I was walking away, but I didn't use enough force and it stopped without catching. My dog was standing next to it, so I jokingly asked him to close it. The door closed. Another time, several similar things happened in 2 days. The first day I was in the bedroom facing the dresser when I heard my puppy come in. I turned around to see he had dug the cat food can out of the garbage. I told her to drop it and she did, directly behind me. I turned back to the dresser and heard a light clink, like metal dropping on metal. I turned and the lid to the cat food can was sitting propped up on the can. I'm positive it wasn't there when I had just looked, and my puppy was on the other side of the room. The next day I rolled out of bed, leaving my glasses on the nightstand, and headed towards the kitchen. I stopped to pet one of the dogs and heard a sound to my left, like something being dropped or falling on the carpet. I turned and my glasses were sitting on the carpet, neatly folded up how they had been on the nightstand. Later in the day, I was cleaning our guest room, and my cat knocked over the jewelry holder that had my wedding necklace on it. The holder was on the floor, but the necklace was nowhere near. Assuming it had fallen in one of the boxes nearby, I figured I'd find it later and kept on going. A few minutes later, I heard a noise in the same area, and there was my necklace on the floor. So some bizarre things happened there, but the overall vibe in the house was so positive and welcoming that even guests commented on it. I never felt threatened or freaked out even when those crazy things happened. Would you like my weekly and monthly compilations completely ad-free? If so, check out the link in the description to my Patreon, where for $3 a month, you can get them all completely ad-free. Case file number 1807, written by Fractal Jester 333. A hidden design, clear and fair. The instant I knew of the podcast bear. This will be short, but keep in mind, there's no words to describe the profundity of how I felt when this happened to me the other day. Also, I've had many glitches and synchronicities and events in my life that have proven to me beyond a doubt that there's a hidden design behind the fabric of reality. But this one was a big one for me because I hadn't had one in a while, and it happened just a few days ago. Okay, so, as simple as it sounds, I was walking downstairs, and as I entered the kitchen, a family member was doing something with food on the counter, and said something extremely specific, and I had my phone in my hand. In that moment, I immediately knew that if I looked at my phone, I was going to see something to do with a podcast and the topic being bears. As specific as that sounds, I should not have known this information. This was a complete gnosis without evidence of the totality of the simulation in that moment. And that totality included this extremely specific data point of the podcast bear. I look down and unlock my phone, and as my YouTube feed refreshes, the first thing that's right there is a podcast with a picture of a grizzly bear. In that moment, the world stood still because I could not have physically known that. It was impossible, and yet I knew it. Case file number 1808, written by A.B. Gry, Krakow 84. A knock, a leak, and a grandfather's streak. When I was like 16 or so, my parents went out of town for a week and left me at home by myself. Which wasn't a big deal, as I knew how to take care of myself and was a responsible kid. No parties or anything. I had my own car and a job, plus school. And I knew if there was an emergency, I could call any number of people who could help. Overall, it was just a chill week, nothing special going on. Except one day, I get home from school and the toilet is running. I was so confused as I knew I hadn't even used the toilet on that day. There was nobody else who could have been there. I couldn't get the toilet to stop running. Thankfully, it wasn't flooding anything. So I just turned the water off and made a note not to use it and tell my parents when they got back. Like 30 seconds after I do that, I hear a knock on the door. I look outside and see my grandfather there. Mind you, this is all happening within 5 minutes of me arriving home as well. I answer the door and say hi. He asks me if everything is okay. I say yeah and mention I just turned off the water on the toilet. He was acting a bit awkwardly, and I know he had no reason to come to the house. He never came over unless he was invited, and there was certainly no reason for him to be there this time. He said he had to go and then drove away. Later on, I told my mom about the whole thing. I figured she asked him to come over and check up on me or something. However, it's been 20 years since then, and to this day, she still denies any of that, and she had no idea why he was there. I tried asking him myself, and he claims he had no idea what I was talking about. So my mystery is, what the hell was my grandfather doing at the house that day, and why doesn't he remember? Case file number 1809, written by Schizario. Miles covered in the blink of an eye. The teleports that make us question why. Something really strange has been happening lately, and I know I'm not crazy, because friends of mine have experienced this with me on 2 separate occasions. I swear I'm teleporting across town somehow. This has happened to me 3 times, and it's seriously starting to freak me out. It happened for the 3rd time less than an hour before I started writing these words. I was riding in my friend's car back to my place from a movie theater on the opposite side of town. A trip that would normally take around 15 minutes. It took us 5, and I noticed what had happened almost immediately. But I didn't want to say anything until my friend, we'll call him E, did too, out of fear of sounding crazy. On the drive, we randomly ended up downtown, close to my place, much sooner than we should have. The transition is so seamless that I can't tell the difference until I see man-made landmarks like buildings. E mentioned that he didn't make any turns that he'd normally have to in order to get there. We just ended up there. We weren't distracted by conversation or anything, and the both of us were stone cold sober. Then I started to freak out a little bit. I told him about the other 2 experiences like that I'd had. More on those later. We made it to my place and decompressed for a bit before he left. In the car, I told E about the other 2 events like that I had experienced. The very first time I had something like that happen, I was walking to a gas station to grab a snack after work, and somehow ended up walking on a street a mile down the road. No time had passed at all, and I know this because I check my watch fairly often. The second experience was the most drastic of all 3. I was in the car with another friend of mine, we'll call him Jay, and we were on our way to a Walmart a 30-minute drive away from his place one morning. We ended up getting there in 10 minutes. We took a turn into this more scenic road in my state, Virginia, which would be a straight path to North Carolina. Instead of us going towards North Carolina, we ended up on a very similar road much closer to Walmart within a matter of seconds. The transition was nearly unnoticeable until I saw buildings I recognize from the part of town the Walmart is in. That experience freaked me out too. I have no clue what's going on, and to be honest, I'm really scared. I don't know what's happening, and I want to find out. Another thing that happens, and this has been consistent all 3 times, is that I, along with E and J, get these horrible burning sensations in our lower chests. Standing up after an experience like this feels like a burden, and walking around is awkward and clumsy. All 3 times I've had this happen, I, along with E and J, have been completely sober. Case file number 1810, written by MCMCE. In the dark by the cars, a massive tail leaves us wondering if we're on Mars. When I was a little kid, my family, parents, sibling aunts, uncles, and cousins would always go camping at a lake on or near the 4th of July. One night, I went to get a Shasta out of the cooler on my own. I had to have been 9 or 10 years old. I was on my own, but not alone, just away from the group. We'd always have to mow a section to camp in and make a ring around a massive tree. Cars, then tents, then the fire pit in that order made a semicircle. So other people were out, but by the fire pit or in their tents because it was already dark out. So I'm alone, but just have to look back to see people. Within shouting distance for sure. Anyways, I had a flashlight, and I'm going to the cooler that's near the cars and I'm shining the light on the ground. Because whether being serious or just trying to scare me, an uncle had to tell me to look out for snakes and tarantulas. As a kid, it was obvious snakes and tarantulas were around. I'd see them be moved or scared away whenever my family would cut the grass before setting up the campsite. As I get near the cooler, I'm walking alongside the cars, and I see a massive tail coming out from under the car. Like too big, the length of my arm and thick as my thigh, just the tail. It obviously notices me and kind of twitches. I notice it and freeze for a second, panic. Then it shoots off under the car and through the grass on the other side. The way it moved was too fast and not like a slither, so I'm thinking of the tail of a massive lizard. I still got my Shasta and beat it back to the campfire. I don't think I told anyone about it, or if I did, they might have just written it off as me imagining it. I still think about what it could have been from time to time. My best guess is maybe someone had a massive pet iguana, and it either escaped or they let it go. I live in Oklahoma, by the way. Case file number 1811, written by Fisherman Yellow. The Abandoned House's Creepy Clown, a day that turned our smiles down. There was this house in my hometown a few streets away from our local park that all the kids thought was haunted. A simple one-story, small house, nothing special or creepy about it. I was about 10 at the time, and one afternoon, a friend and I decided to jump the fence and go into the backyard, which was bare except for the overgrown grass, which was about knee height. There were curtains on all the windows and doors, so we couldn't see inside. We walked through the grass and closer to the veranda, approaching the rear door, when we heard this creepy clown laugh. We both hightailed it out of there as fast as we could, jumped on our bikes and rode home. My memory doesn't recall what we did after, whether we told anyone or our parents. But we never went back, and it was never lived in for the next few years I spent in the town. I was certain it wasn't my friend playing a joke, as he was right next to me, and the sound came from elsewhere. No other kids were with us, and I still can't think of how it happened. Case file number 1812, written by Daughter of Israel. From English to Korean in a blink. The K-drama that made me stop and think. A few hours ago, I got home from work and went about my usual routine. Took off my work clothes, changed in some sweats, and then scoured my fridge looking for food that's simply not there. Anyway, I plopped down on my couch and turned on the TV to scroll through what's new on Netflix. I finally settled on a random K-drama, and I chose it specifically because the trailer had an English dub. Now I know there's a very mixed opinion about this, but I prefer to watch foreign languages shows with English dubs. And it's not because I have an aversion to reading. I love to read. But most of the time, when I'm lounging on the couch and have the TV on, I'm not actually watching whatever is on. I just like to have background noise as I'm scrolling on my phone or laptop. You know, ADHD things. So the show starts, and I'm halfway listening, halfway adding things that I definitely don't need to my Amazon cart. I'm barely looking at the TV, but following along just fine, because it's in English. However, after about 15 minutes into the show, I start noticing that English is no longer being spoken. I look up from my phone and start reading the subtitles, thinking that this is just a show that switches back and forth between languages. But after a few minutes, it still hadn't returned back to English. I think, that's strange. Well, maybe when I was on my phone, I was so distracted that I rolled into the remote and it changed the language back to Korean. So I go into the settings. There's no option for an English dub. This show is strictly only in Korean. Confused, I rewind the show back to the beginning because, like I explained, for the first 15 minutes or so, I could have sworn I was following along to English being spoken. But no, the characters are definitely only speaking Korean now. I don't know what to think. I guess I could have been reading the subs in English, so I heard English in my head. But that's just not adding up for me because I was barely reading the subs, yet still felt like I knew what was being said. And I could have sworn the trailer was in English, which was ultimately why I clicked on the show in the first place. Case file number 1813, written by City and Mother. Through moves in time, the ring returns. A tale of a band that forever yearns. 14 years ago, I had my oldest. When I found out that I was pregnant, I waited a couple of months before I told my boss. "When will you be wed?" was the first thing out of her mouth. I can envision that moment like it happened today. It stuck with me. I was almost 23, but I look younger, and throughout the pregnancy, I was constantly met with judgments of being an unwed young mother. We didn't just believe that we should be married for the sake of pregnancy, thankfully, oh my god. But we were together, so I decided to just buy a pretty ring and just wear it when I went out. It is a silver band with small, shiny stones, purchased from Target. No big deal. I wore it until it was tarnished. But at that point, I acquired my grandmother's wedding ring when she died, so I started wearing that. I put the tarnished ring in a jewelry box with intentions of laughing about it one day, and that was it. A few years ago, and a few houses later, I found the ring. It looked worse than I remembered it, but hung it on a jewelry tree to continue what I was doing and forgot about it. Until a month or so later, while cleaning out a couch I was getting rid of, I found the same ring but shiny new. Quite what the hell. I went to find the other one. Still gross looking, but it was the same ring. I know I didn't buy another, so yes, I was very what the hell. I put the original one back on the jewelry tree and tossed the other one in a drawer. I was creeped out, but eventually forgot about it. Fast forward to last week. I was cleaning and gutting out my kitchen, and there was the ring, sitting in a ceramic pie dish. I thought that maybe one of the kids took it out of the drawer, but because I had no use for it, I put it in a bag I was throwing unwanted items into. A big black trash bag. I put it into the bag, didn't toss it. I even placed it into a Tupperware bowl. I took the bag outside when I was done, deep cleaned the whole kitchen, wiped baseboards and under everything that had a crevice. The other day, I was sweeping the kitchen floors. Under the kitchen table, there was another freaking ring, shiny silver and sparkling stones. They just keep on coming. Case file number 1814, written by Ignis184. Surgeon's shock and a priest's insight. A miracle light or medical might. When I was 6, I began complaining of frequent UTIs and pain in my abdomen. Luckily, the pediatrician took me seriously. There are 2 tubes called ureters that carry urine from your kidneys, where it is made, to your bladder, where it is stored. There is supposed to be a one-way valve in these tubes that keeps the urine from flowing backwards. I did not have a valve. I went in for surgery to create a valve and examine the level of damage done. Urine is chemically extremely irritating, which is why your bladder is especially adapted to holding it long term. They expected to find massive scarring in my kidneys and ureters, because they are not built to be exposed to that concentration of urine for long. I was placed on the kidney transplant list ahead of the operation. 1 week after surgery to create the valve, scans show 1% damage in the kidney? Surgeon says he can't explain it. Parish priest who did the last rites says he can. Now I am a scientist working in regenerative medicine. I wonder about this incident. On the one hand, it's well known that kids heal way better than adults. But on the other hand, my surgeon was pediatric, so surely was taking that into account. Kidneys are not known to regenerate easily, like mucosal linings of the liver is. I am religious, so I'm not opposed to thinking it really was a miracle, but I also don't think it had to be. God does plenty of amazing things through the natural world. There is a famous urological surgeon working on tissue engineering. I have never met him, but if I ever come across him at a conference, I would love to hear if he can explain it. Case file number 1815, written by Potential Macaroon, 8532. A Dream's Embrace. Goodbye from Grandma's Loving Face. When I was 12, my parents got divorced and we lived with my dad. Stayed at my mom's every other weekend and saw her twice a week. Anyways, one night I had a dream that my mom had come to pick up my brothers and I. We were driving around in her car when she told us that she had something to tell us. In my dream, she told us that she has cancer and is very sick. I remember waking up, feeling a bit worried and brushed it off as a weird dream. Here comes the weird part. The next time she came to pick us up, we were driving in her car and she told us she had cancer. It was weird as hell, just like the dream I had. But that was 13 years ago and my mom has been cancer-free for about 11 years now. Also, whenever I was pregnant with my daughter, right before I found out her gender, I dreamt that I opened up an envelope and it said, "It's a girl." A few weeks later, confirmed that I was pregnant with a girl. Then I had another dream like 2 weeks before I gave birth, and I saw my daughter and her weight. Whenever I gave birth, it was all the same. Lastly, my grandmother passed away pretty unexpectedly a few years ago. I took it pretty hard considering I visited with her and my grandpa just about every other day. Well, a day or two after she passed, I had a dream that I was walking up some stairs that led into a room. I opened the door and my grandma was sitting on the couch. I ran up to her and started crying and hugging her, saying, "But you're gone, you passed away." And she wiped my tears and said, "I know," and gave me the biggest hug. Then I woke up. It felt so real, the hug and everything. I think it was her saying her final goodbye. Case file number 1816, written by To Forget Me, To Not To, The Basement's Abyss, and The Voicemail's Kiss. This will always stick with me because I cannot explain it to this day. Back in 2015, when I was just out of college, I moved to southern Delaware, I know, horrible, to live with friends and my boyfriend at the time. I'm a musician, so I traveled around to play shows in different towns. I had an old friend reach out to me about 6 months after I had moved to come back up to upstate New York to play a show. I took my boyfriend and 3 friends with me to the show. During our stay, we had some extra time to get a little sightseeing in, and my friends hadn't been to upstate New York before. We went to this old trail I used to hike a lot, which led to these 2 houses in the woods where I would hang out with people. The first house was this abandoned glass home project. All the windows had been smashed in, but it was still cool to see the structure. The second house, however, was much creepier and held a dark energy to it. When we got to the second house, we noticed the basement door was open. In all the times I had hiked to that house, I never saw that door open. It was always locked or had overgrown weeds in the way. Of course, my curious butt was like, now we have to see what's in the basement of this house. All 5 of us cautiously agreed to go in, but something still felt off. The house from the outside looked abandoned and neglected, but inside it looked like a bomb had gone off. When I walked into the basement, there were 3 rooms. The one off to my right, that was the furthest part of the house, was completely pitch black. No light, no windows, nothing. It just felt like if you stuck your hand through the doorway, it would disappear into nothingness. This was around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and there wasn't direct sunlight outside. But it wasn't super cloudy or dark. So of course, with my 3 friends and boyfriend watching me, I approach the doorway, but for some reason, I can't bring myself to walk through it. I take my phone to shine a light in the room, and my phone starts going crazy. The screen starts to glitch out and do things on its own. The light flickers. My phone had never done anything like this before. Creeped out, we leave, because I run out feeling like I'm about to throw up. We walk back to the car and drive to a favorite local restaurant of mine for lunch. When we arrive, I see that my phone has a voicemail. No missed call, no ring, nothing. It just appeared in my notifications. I put my phone on speaker for everyone in the car to hear. When I play voicemail, my blood goes cold. It's my voice talking. Somehow, a voicemail I had left my dad one day after class 3 years prior was playing. A voicemail I had left for someone else on their phone, a phone that doesn't exist anymore. How do you explain that? I started crying because at the time I had a really awful relationship with my dad. I remember a bit of what the voicemail said. I was telling my dad that I missed him and that I was just getting out of dance practice and was heading to my biology lab to work on some homework. My freshman year self, talking and rambling to my dad. Somehow, this voicemail made its way through time and space and landed on my current phone at the time. All of us were stunned. My best friend, who was with me at the time, she still remembers it to this day whenever I bring it up. Every once in a while I think about that day, and it makes me cold when I do. Case file number 1817, written by Inspork, The Phone Call Mystery and Grandpa's Trickery. When I was 7, I woke up early in the morning on my birthday. My parents were gone. The house was empty except for my grandpa sitting on the couch in the living room. He said happy birthday to me, told me my parents had gone out to get a few last-minute things for my birthday party, and would be back soon. My grandpa was always a bit on the weird, aloof side. I never saw him much as we got older. I think he and my dad didn't have the best relationship, so when he died, when I was a teen, It came as a surprise because we hadn't seen him in several years. Anyway, that morning he asked me if I wanted to see a magic trick, so I said sure. Before he could get another word out, the phone rang. He reached over, answered it, then held it out to me. "It's for you." I held the phone to my ear and it was Grandpa's voice on the other line, saying, "Happy birthday, kiddo." I don't know if he expected my reaction to be amazed, confused, or delighted, but it filled me with terror. I just said thank you, and then, "I gotta go now." To which the voice on the phone replied, "Okay, kiddo, have a good day." I gave the phone back to Grandpa. He hung it up, and that was the end of it. To this day, I still don't know exactly how he did that or why. This was the early 90s, so it wouldn't be as easy a prank to pull off as it would be today. Though I guess still technically possible. It just weirded me out, and I had dreams about it several times over the years. Grandpa wasn't especially known for being a prankster or knew any magic tricks. Like I said, he was cold and aloof. My parents later came home with my birthday cake and a few party supplies. They never mentioned a magic trick, asked if I got a phone call, or made any indication that they were in on it. They definitely wouldn't have had cell phones back then. I remember all that through an uncanny lens now. I'm sure it's just my mind coloring the memory as I age, but I remember everything about it just creeping me out and giving me an off feeling. Grandpa's mischievous grin as he held out the phone for me. That voice on the line that was so unmistakably his voice. I have scared myself a few times thinking, if he was sitting right next to me, who was on the phone? If he was on the phone, who was sitting next to me? I just wish I had gotten a chance to ask him about it and finally get an explanation. Caissons sur file 1805. A chill in the air, a shadow sweep. The night something moved without a peep. So, as people call them, shadow people, they are a feature of the multiverse. My theory is that they aren't ghosts, but they're individuals, souls, that are trapped between the universes. They couldn't cross over fully, and now they're in limbo state. But it's not their physical bodies, otherwise they would die of thirst and hunger and so on. It's their soul that is trying to incorporate into our universe, but they can't quite make it. They are trapped there, unlike a soul, which is just a fragment, an echo of the person that did live there, in that universe before. This is, I guess, sadder, you could say, because there's no way I know of to help them cross over and materialize into this world. Although the question for that then is, would they materialize into a copy of themselves in this universe? Or maybe as they were making the transition, the copy that was here died as well. So that's why they couldn't finish the transfer. Maybe that's why there are limbo states, buffer areas I like to call them, dead worlds where no one else is there or very few. Because if they don't do that, if the other copy of them dies while in transit, the data is kind of lost in limbo. That's a very sad thought, but I think it fits. Caissons sur file 1806. Objects that move and cigarettes that clone. Tales from a house that's never alone. So this was funny because for whatever reason, I can't say Marlboros, blah, blah, blah. I had to take that line so many times and it still doesn't sound quite right. I don't know what it is, but why would you name your brand something that's so hard to pronounce? I don't know. That's a funny side note. But yeah, the first story about cigarettes, it's just a duplication event. Nothing crazy, but still interesting to read about. They always are. Wish it happened to me with something important, gold bars, silver coins, money, whatever. Food. Subway duplication would be my dream, I buy 3 footlongs, normally, chicken teriyaki, or just veggie sometimes when I'm feeling light. Probably eat 2 at once, maybe 2.5 if I'm feeling really hungry. And then put the other footlong in the fridge and it never duplicates, sadly. I want it to. Come on, universe, do it. And then with the laundry, then it's not duplication, it's just disappearing, and the copy of you in a different universe probably had an extra basket, 5 baskets, filled with whatever clothes were in that basket, light, darks, whatever. A whole lot of things happened in that house, though. If you don't feel bad vibes, I would be very surprised if there was a malicious spirit there. They could just be ripples and anomalies, errors in the code in that particular server infrastructure that is governing that local area where your house is located. And if that's the case, you're not going to feel any bad vibes because there's no presence there to inflict that. It is just universal noise. Now, time for the quote of the day. Dr. Ian Malcolm, life finds a way. There's a microscopic form of life, I think it's a tardigrade or something like that, where it can live in space, it can go dormant in space, in a vacuum, it can live deep in the ocean where it's freezing. No matter the state, it has some mechanism to endure. They're extremophobes, I think they're called. Life will always find a way. We could, I was watching the Fallout show. It's able to blend both serious and comedic, lighthearted, almost absurd themes together in a way that somehow meshes, like it shouldn't, but it does. They did a good job on that. But it's the idea that, okay, we nuke the entire planet, but that's fine. Life will still persist. They'll find a way. They'll adapt. They'll evolve to that environment. Makes you wonder if there is life that has somehow adapted to living in space. You had a few stories like that in Star Trek, where there are creatures that are roaming between solar systems, just floating in the void. Maybe getting their energy from sunlight or, starlight that is in the general vicinity. You have the inverse square law, so whatever light there is out there would be very dim, but you have so much of it coming in. Maybe they wouldn't need much to survive. That's a tangent, but I guess it's applicable. Okay. Case notes are file 1807. A hidden design, clear and fair. The instant I knew of the podcast bear. So I just want to say the thumbnail for this one was fun. It's one of those funny stories where you can create a thumbnail that is just humorous, a bear singing, or in this case, just having a podcast. I would listen to that. A lot of grunts and roars, but okay, bring it on. Isn't it funny though, how our subconscious mind can peer into the universe's surroundings and infer information, perhaps future information, but my guess is there was some clue, some minor sign in that environment that indicated that maybe this podcast recommendation would be a bear, would involve a bear. Maybe your family member, your brother, whoever it was listening to this podcast before, and because you're on the same Wi-Fi, that's why it was popping up in your suggested feed. Now, that wouldn't explain why you knew. Your mind somehow knew it would be there. Maybe at some point, hours before, he mentioned something about a bear, and that's why your mind went there. It was like an educated guess. I don't know. It might be even deeper than that. The subconscious has a lot of tendrils out there in the universe, gathering little bits of information that we aren't aware of. So, whatever it is, it's pretty cool. And I'm now pretty curious what that podcast was. Case notes are file 1808. A knock, a leak, and a grandfather's streak. You know those reels on Instagram and TikTok where it's a dad or sometimes a grandpa, if their kid needs help with some renovation or repair, and the dad shows up and, he has his tool belt on, and he steps out of the car with swag and, swings the hammer. Now it's his time to shine. Kind of get that vibe, like somehow, I don't think this was your grandpa. I think it was his soul that split off, because somehow he knew you needed help, but yet wasn't sure what it was, and I mean, this was just his soul that was there, not really him. That's why he didn't remember when you asked him, because when the soul returns, it doesn't bring the memories. It doesn't have a brain, it's just a soul manifesting corporeally. So I think that's what it is. Your grandpa was called to you because you had an issue that needed fixing, but it was just a soul, so he couldn't directly help. Pretty wholesome, I'd say. Case notes are file 1809. Miles covered in a blink of an eye. The teleports that make us question why. So we have a classic space-time portal story where people are zipping across different locations seamlessly, and that's always the word used or described. There's no transition. You don't realize it's happening until after it happened. And then you notice you're a place that you shouldn't be already. You're there too quick. One note that is very different from any story I've read regarding space-time portals is describing an adverse reaction to it. Normally people don't feel anything at all. But you, E and J, all had this burning sensation in your stomach and a sense of uneasiness that I've never heard before. So is this something else than a space-time portal? Could it be your own body generating a space-time portal? But even then, why would E and J feel anything then, if it's the same sort of space-time portal as everyone else crosses into when they're driving, usually when they're driving? I don't know, that's an anomaly I don't have an answer for, but very interesting to note. Now time for the quote of the day. Captain Marco Ramius. In the end, there is no escape. There is no escape from the past. What is our character? What is our personality, our memories? They are the history of our life. We are what we did. Now we can change it, we can try to alter the influence of the past, but there's no escaping it. It is with you. Every choice you've made, good or bad, will always be there. Your mind can sometimes rewrite history, but it doesn't change what did happen. So try not to let your mind do that too much. And it's actually it's a very good reason to keep a diary, even just jotting down important things that happened. So you have a concrete, immutable record of your own life. Okay, so it's 1810. In the dark by the cars, a massive tail leaves us wondering if we're on Mars. So there are urban legends about Bigfoot. We all know them. But you don't see many surrounding animals that are lizard-like. Which is curious because you often see that in sci-fi, especially on new planets, tentacle monsters and stuff like that. I don't think this was real in this universe. I think it was probably multiverse sight, but to a distant universe where there were creatures like this. Almost could even be a space-time site where you're seeing in the past, back to millions of years ago when dinosaurs were the king apex predators, or just life on the planet. Because something like that I figure would leave a lot of evidence behind, its own excrement and signs in the brush and trees, and probably makes a lot of noise too. I doubt it could have gone unnoticed by anyone else, even if they were a bit far away. Although it would be funny if it was just someone's massive iguana pet. How you describe it doesn't seem likely, but who knows? Maybe someone's breeding them really big down there in Oklahoma. Case notes are filed 1811. The Abandoned House's Creepy Clown. A day that turned our smiles down. I know a lot of people have this innate fear of clowns, and I've never shared that. I think I had a clown one time for a birthday party that my mom had hired. I just didn't really find them that interesting, but I wasn't terrified of it. I know Stephen King, he has a book, It, a movie based on it. I didn't see that, actually. It's just kind of there, it's neutral for me. It's not particularly scary or that interesting, but then I haven't really focused on it. That said, if I'm exploring an abandoned house and I hear a clown's laugh, I am booking out of there just as fast, if not faster than you did. Because what the hell? If a clown is in a place they're not supposed to be, then I might be terrified. But just in general, at a birthday party or something, that's fine. Clowns at birthday parties, A-okay. Clowns in abandoned homes, stuff of nightmare fuel. Case notes are filed 1812. From English to Korean in a blink. The K-drama that made me stop and think. So we have had stories like this, maybe 3 times? Trying to remember. I think one was where someone had developed, they needed glasses, they were looking out the window, but they didn't have their glasses on and yet had perfect eyesight, and then realized later that they needed their glasses again. So their vision corrected and then went back to normal. Another time, there was a story, I think it was a cop that was talking to a suspect in a different language or something like that. The idea of either your senses correcting themselves or having the ability to interpret information you shouldn't be able to, like a language you don't know. There is one other possibility, that it wasn't related to your brain, but it was actually a kind of multiverse sight or temporary transition, where you were in a different universe where they did have, over there, dubs for this show, but back here they didn't. So you really did listen to it in English for the first 15 minutes, and then you transferred back, and then of course, the dubs don't exist. So if it isn't that, if it is really just the brain suddenly having that information and understanding, I don't know, what could cause that? Because it reverts. If it was permanent, then you could say it's almost like the brain rewiring itself, piecing information from the subconscious, and then incorporating that into the conscious mind, and almost like boosting your IQ with the limitless pill. But I don't know, it seems weird because it reverts back. It's almost like your brain was testing its capability. Like your subconscious was trying to upgrade, but didn't want to go too far, too fast. Maybe it was too much for your brain. I don't know. I'm kind of stumped on these ones because they're very infrequent and it's not entirely clear what could cause it. Obviously, it's something happening in your brain if it's not multiverse related. The fact it reverts just leaves me stumped. Or you know what? And just a random thought I had. What if sometimes, in quantum immortality, maybe the soul that is transferring over from a different universe isn't directed properly? Maybe sometimes it latches onto an incorrect body, and the souls intermingle, but they're not the same soul. So maybe in those periods of time, you develop a certain, if this person was Korean, maybe it was a Korean girl that died, transferred into you, and then for 15 minutes until they corrected it and sent her to the correct body, her body, then you knew Korean. That's completely spitballing, but kind of makes some sense. Nothing is perfect, right? The simulation isn't. So if it is a simulation and there's a soul zipping over, maybe sometimes they make mistakes. Kind of makes me wonder, what would happen if the soul was permanently in you? You would just develop a split personality. Maybe that's what's going on with people who develop split personality. Maybe they literally do have a different soul in them. It's kind of wild. Kind of wild. Now time for the quote of the day. Dr. Richard Kimball. It's not just about your guilt or innocence. It's about justice. Yeah, that's a man that is thinking not of the individual, but of the holistic level, macro scale implications. Because if there is no justice system, if there's no system where people believe that there is blind justice and accurate justice, that the innocent go free and the guilty are punished, if people lose faith in that, maybe it'll lead to chaos. Now, I don't really believe that, but I understand the perspective. And this was from the movie The Fugitive, which is a great movie, and it tugs at your heart because if you're innocent. I mean, most people who are innocent don't run, but if they do, if they know they're innocent, they really didn't do what they're accused of. I mean, I get it. And then the whole apparatus that is supposed to work for you turns against you. It's really the stuff of nightmares, if you ask me. Okay, so let's file 1813. Through moves and time, the ring returns. A tale of a band that forever yearns. This seems almost like a program error, as if there is a program running in the master server where they're meant to duplicate certain items, but it's applied to something incorrect, like this ring. Because as you say, they just keep on coming. This is even beyond a standard duplication glitch, which generally only happens one time, maybe two. My guess is you'll keep finding these randomly throughout your life, unless they correct a mistake, but could be worse, it's like the Gemini, is it Gemini? Curse in Harry Potter, where they're invading the the vault, and everything starts multiplying. Now in the book, these were scalding hot, so it was much worse than in the movie, but still, you're just drowning in rings later on in your life. That's how you die. Rings just duplicate and suffocate you. You're buried in silver tarnished rings. Weird thought, yeah. Case notes for file 1814. Surgeon shock and priest insight. A miracle's light or medical might. You know what is interesting, actually? I just recently found this out. Well, first off, children do recover faster, as you mentioned, because they have more stem cells floating about, which stem cells are sort of like nanobots that can go anywhere in the body and know how to repair basically anything. They're almost magic. So children have more of them, so they can repair things easier. Organs, skin, etc. But if you're an adult, like I presume most are, you can actually eat chocolate. The flavonoids in chocolate will boost your stem cell production. Now, it doesn't mean you eat chocolate, you become Wolverine or anything like that, but it is beneficial. Eat some chocolate. Now, best to stick with dark chocolate, not too much sugar added. Have a square or two a day. That is apparently extremely healthy. Just don't eat too much, don't become fat. But assuming you stay thin, it's an extremely positive thing to do. Good news about eating chocolate is good news. Now, could this be a guardian angel that literally healed you or protected your insides? Maybe. I don't know if they have that kind of direct power. My guess is they don't, but I could be wrong. There are stories where they can directly intervene, slow down time, move you out of the way. So maybe they can do this too. Maybe the explanation though is just simple. Maybe it really is that you have a genetic mutation that enables rapid healing. Or maybe a protection against the kind of acidity or chemical corrosion of pee, of urine. Who knows? I mean, we are all mutating all the time. Every new human that is born is slightly different, sometimes majorly different, than other human beings. Now, usually these mutations don't benefit us, sometimes they're detrimental, sometimes they're slightly positive, sometimes they are miraculous. There are swimmers out there that are born with webbed feet and hands, which greatly assists in swimming. Now, that would be an evolutionary advantage, but it's still not such an advantage that it promulgates widely. So there are beneficial mutations, but again, they only promulgate if they're beneficial for reproduction. Otherwise, it doesn't ripple through the genetic code of the human species. So there are benefits like this that might exist. Maybe you'll be the last one to have it. Maybe you'll pass it on. Who knows? And sometimes there's dominant and recessive genes, and so it gets kind of complicated. But personally, I think it's just a trait that you have. It's not a miracle, probably. I think it's just a medical marvel. Fun to be special. Okay, so it's 1815. A dream's embrace, goodbye from grandma's loving face. If you can, we could do this now. If you do a genetic test like 23andMe, they can report back to you if you have genes that make you more likely to have heart attacks or cardiovascular issues or cancer. So somehow, your mind as a child knew that your mom had this genetic trait. Maybe it ran in her family, I don't know, something like that. But there was information available that your subconscious drew on and inferred. Now, it is interesting that she did this in the car as well. Predicting that is just incredible. But predicting she'd have cancer, I think that's very doable and entirely believable to me, because we could literally do that with science right now. That's fantastic that she recovered from it. We have great technology now. It's not just chemotherapy. Similar story to being pregnant, having a dream before. Guessing her weight, though, is just incredible. Really, some people have minds that are so sharply attuned. Like I was saying, there are mutations. Maybe somehow some people are having brains formed that are incredibly attuned to predicting the future, possible futures. It really is awesome to read about. Now, the last one about your grandma, that was just your grandma coming to visit you, I think. For whatever reason, it isn't possible to visit every single person that you love. If you die, your soul, a fragment can linger behind, but maybe there's a hard limit to how many people you can go and visit, because if a person has a story where they are visited by a loved one, usually I think they're true, and they really did experience that, and I think it really is the echo of the person that died and came to visit them. But often in these stories, they only visit one person. Maybe they do visit everyone, but most people are kind of close-minded. They wouldn't admit it. They wouldn't tell other people that, yeah, I had a dream about my mother coming to see me, and it was her final parting gift, to just hug me and say goodbye. They would just bury that. They would keep that internalized and wouldn't tell a soul, because they don't want to be seen as crazy. People really want to fit in with the tribe. It is a natural instinct. If that's the case, it's kind of sad. Now time for the joke of the day. Someone complimented my parking today. There was a note on my windshield saying, "Parking fine." Fine parking. Not really what they mean, though. Pay up the moolah. Okay, so it's about 1816. The basement's abyss and the voicemail's kiss. What a unique story this was. Really interesting. Now, how does that area that you mentioned is like this pitch darkness, the overwhelming darkness where if you stick your hand in it, it's like it'll disappear forever. Going near that place, assuming it was haunted, so-called, just having a presence there, good or bad, can feel overwhelming to people. No matter the moral alignment, you could say. How does that connect to receiving a voicemail from yourself that you sent to a different phone that doesn't even exist anymore? To my knowledge, cell carriers do not store voicemail data for that long. And even if they did, why would it be sent to you in that moment, just after experiencing this wild event of paranormal intensity? The timing seems to indicate that it is related. Can a spirit somehow influence data transfer? I honestly don't know. I mean, I know they can interact and leave voicemails on electronic devices. Spirits are able to interact with electronics, lights and computers and so on. But this, I don't know how they could possibly have done it. It's kind of a trippy story, but very interesting, so unique. I can imagine everyone's face, including yours, was just completely awestruck and their jaws were on the floor, as mine would be in that case. Okay, so it's file 1817. The phone call mystery and Grandpa's trickery. Okay, so trying to piece together how I would do this if it was a prank from your grandpa. You say he wasn't the prank type, but just entertaining the thought to help aid myself in my ability to do pranks later on. Let's go with that. So how would I do this? Okay, it's the 90s. You don't really have cell phones. So the first step, you need an accomplice that is going to ring at a specified time. Now, he didn't control when you came down, but that's just a random variable that a lot of magicians play with. Kind of a gamble. If it doesn't go off on time or before or after, whatever, they just roll with it. And so assuming that's the case, they had a prearranged time to call from an accomplice at a landline phone in a different house. One of his friends maybe, or maybe your parents, and they never mentioned it was a prank. But yeah, assuming that's the case, he would have to pre-record his voice on a record player, and they did have those in the 90s. Not digital, it would be on tape, but you could do that. Yeah, he would have to guess kind of what you would say. You're saying, okay kiddo, have a good day. That's not too hard to believe. It couldn't be his soul because he was the one that proffered it as an example. Listen to this, it's me. Unless it wasn't really your grandpa there. That is another possibility. If it was just his soul talking through the phone. That's kind of cool to think about too, but no matter what, even if he was aloof and not really there, at least he was in this moment and you have this memory that you can cherish for the rest of your life. It's a good thing to have. It really is. And, he created that for you. So that's something. Nothing to scoff at. Now time for the joke of the day. My son can only memorize 25 letters of the alphabet. He says he doesn't know why. He'll never know why. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.